You're listening to Pro Booth Talk, education and insights for photo booth company owners.
Props. Lap.
This is a hot topic for
Yeah.
your reaction to the topic is funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I still actually use some props. I know a lot of people don't. I am pretty sure you don't use any props at all. Is that correct?
I don't know, not for some years. Not generally. I can't say I don't use them. There's some occasions where, like, if the client absolutely insists, then we'll use props. Or if it's brand specific, where the brand printed their own props, because like I remember we did a shoe event where they had like a giant shoe prop. That was actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
but we
sure.
did
Like,
away with props.
obviously,
for the most
if
part.
a client is insistent, we're not going to just like tell them no. But I mean, like in your general, someone books you for a wedding, you don't have a standard prop box ready to go out unless they are specifically requesting it.
Right.
My bowler hat is off to you, Lab. I'm
So
so jealous.
I have to ask, like, what type of conversations? Because I'm sure everybody's wondering, like, what type of conversations do you have with your clients when they ask you, like, oh, do you, the typical questions is like, what's included with the package? Do you guys include props? Like, what's the conversation that you guys have with your clients about that?
So I don't feel like it comes up very often in the conversations in the sales calls. I think sometimes it does, but I think more often than not, it's not a question that they're asking. For us, we just put it in one of our forms, one of our event forms that asks, do you want to have props? And we say, we recommend no props. And here's a couple reasons why, but if you want them, we'll bring them. And most people say that they do want them. I think it's really a matter of like just taking that control and telling the client what's best. I think most companies kind of go through a process. I think you could judge where people are in their business by how they feel about props and how many props they use. Like, I remember when I first started, not only did we have a ton of props, but we were so like, we felt like props made the photo booth. You had to have props. I went to yard sales, and after Halloween, I spent so much money at the Halloween store buying up all this garbage, and we had these massive prop boxes, and we had like 8-foot tables just overflowing with props, and we had hat stands and all of this stuff, and that was like our primary marketing. And so many things are wrong about that, and that's like the first stage I think most people go through, and then they'll start like pulling back a little bit and start hating props first because of the storage and the loading in and loading out and setting them up and keeping them clean and whatnot. But then I think at some point most people start to realize what an eyesore they are in the final output, and to kind of start graduating away from them entirely. But I would say, well, first, I guess let's talk about some of the pros with props. Some of the benefits is, as much as I hate to admit, there can be benefits to props. So you don't use props, so I'll put you on the spot. What are some of the benefits of props, even though you've ignored them?
I mean, I haven't ignored them. When I went through the same stages as you. When I first started, that was like my primary selling point. Like, I would talk the heck up out of props, the investment that we made in them, how unique they were. So I'm not team props initially. Like, initially we had the 8-foot tables. We bragged about like how unique everything was, and it wasn't until someone made a comment, one of our peers like made a comment about like how gross props were. And at the time I didn't understand and I didn't see it because I thought they were fabulous. Like, the sillier, the wackier. I had like, premium props. Like, we had the horse's head, which I don't know if you remember, Jason, from a couple years back. Like,
We still have
those
some
were
in a
really
box
big.
somewhere.
Those, I mean, guests love them. They're really big for weddings, and they're really cool for photos and stuff. But when I started pulling back was when I realized, for my own event, and I've brought this up before, it was it wasn't for a wedding. It was for a New Year's party, and we had a casino theme party, and all of the family, all the friends that were invited, we were all like decked out. We were dressed up like as if it was a wedding, you know, and my kids were really young at the time, and we have these silly props, and at the time they're cool. We loved how cheesy and ridiculous we were, like being with like the fake glasses and stuff. But now I look back and I'm thinking, dang, we got some amazing family photos where, folks that don't normally dress up were dressed up to the nines. And like, I can't frame those photos because, there's like silly lip props in the shot, whether we're using it like to the side of our face or right in front of our face. It's such a bummer to like look back and think like, dang, I wish I didn't have those props. Like we
Hmm.
would have had the same great time in the photos. And this is something that I speak to with my clients. Like people always ask me, how do you even tell your clients that are insistent on props? How do you tell them no to props? Because I do have that conversation. It's not like people come and approach me and like, we want props, and I don't talk about it at all. I do. I have a very serious conversation with them about it, in depth, about like my own personal experience on why I pulled back and why they should reevaluate like their desire for props and like how they perceive props for their wedding. And it's the conversation where a lot of brides have like that like light bulb moment, like, oh wow, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I didn't think about 15 years from now, um, you know, being older, not being as thin, because I bring that up a lot. Like I was young, I was thin, and I won't have that moment back. My kids won't be, 2 and 3 again. Of course, there's the benefits that you're asking about. Of course, like everybody isn't gonna be comfortable in a photo booth. So people who are a little bit shy, a little bit nervous, a prop gives them like it gives them a distraction and something to hold with their hands. A lot of people who get in a photo, the first question you get is like, what do I do with my hands? People like fidget, like, what do I do? And the nice thing about props is they're automatically, without thinking, they can pick something up and just hold it, even if they're not using the prop the way they should. So the benefit is it does take a lot of like the pressure off of your guests on like what to do, how to pose them. Not everybody's like, ready to vogue it for the photo booth. And those people that aren't ready, a prop is like just very, very easy, no brainer type of, vibe for the photo booth. So that definitely has benefits.
Yeah, and there arguably can be fun with certain crowds, and maybe keeps people coming back to try different poses with different props and
Yeah.
whatnot. But speaking on the cons, which you've touched on a few, my biggest thing is all those pros feel like props are just a crutch, and if you need a crutch, if you're newer in the industry and you don't know how to engage with people yet, or you don't have great photo quality yet, it is a good crutch to distract from that lack of photo quality or engagement. But like you mentioned, the people that are shy and don't know how to pose, that's why we make sure we hire team members that are so great at engaging with people and making them feel comfortable and helping them pose and making them look great, or even if they don't look great, making them feel great or very comfortable in the photo booth. And obviously we try to take really good photos, and I think that props, like you mentioned, takes away from a really good photo. But I personally, I feel like props are a crutch. I think a lot of people will disagree with that and argue that people just love props. I think I would argue that if you show me one amazing photo with props, I can show you 10 more amazing without, because when you take away props, it makes people actually start to pose and engage with the
Get
camera. They
creative.
start hugging each other. They start,
Yeah.
doing things that are actual poses instead of just standing. Typically, people don't even know what they're holding. They just grab a bunch of stuff and hold it in front of
Yeah.
the camera in front of their face, and then afterwards they'd be like, "Oh, what do I even have?" And read it, And
Yeah.
like, I like a prop if someone actually takes it and engages with it and poses with it. But if they're just holding a bunch of things, it's just creates for a poor photo, and that's not what we want.
Yeah. I do remember when we used to, it's so many years ago that it's like a big memory, but I do remember a lot of one of the pros for props was people actually had like goals for like the next session I'm going to get in, I want that prop, the next session. So it does encourage a little bit more usage, because now people aren't thinking of like photos of themselves. They're just thinking of like photos with the props, which now I look back is kind of weird because we don't, for the way we focus my company, my business, we don't really focus on like trying to get cheesy photos. So like guests choosing props to pose with for their next photo is kind of odd to me now, because we really talk a lot about like guests posing for beautiful photos of themselves, like portraits of themselves. So I do remember, I mean, one of the pros, I know the way I'm saying it, it doesn't sound like a pro, but one of the pros is it does encourage your guests to like come back and like challenge themselves to like use that horse head, or we had like
Yeah.
this silly crybaby giant head. I actually love that prop. For someone who doesn't love props, if I had to put one prop on my photo booth, I love the giant baby head that's crying, because it really just draws a crowd, and it really loosens up people who are like nervous about being in an open photo booth. Because I know for the longest time that was like a very new concept. Like people were very, when I first started, a lot of people were nervous about like having an open photo booth where everybody got to see you posing, and having props distracts people so they don't even notice the crowd outside of the photo booth.
Yeah. I think we started about the same time, because that was my experience too, is everything was enclosed and slowly kind of migrated to everything being open.
Yeah.
So, and we're actually
Yeah.
seeing a lot of inquiries for enclosed right now. It seems to be trying to make a comeback. We always try to persuade people against it, just because it's just so much more engaging for people to have an open, and aesthetically also
Yeah.
typically it just looks so much better. But
Yeah.
that's our own preference. And of course, like everyone is in their own stage of their business or runs their business differently. Like we're not certainly saying that props are wrong. We are just saying that props are
Right.
wrong for us and the type of product we're trying to put out. If you're doing a photo booth that is more geared at the fun, like zany, which that's the idea that people think of when they think of a photo booth. That's the image that's conjured up, is the fun props and things like that. So I mean,
Yeah, like
there's certainly nothing
cheesy.
wrong with that, because you're meeting the client's expectations, and that's important. But I would
I
rather
feel
like
like
steer
I feel
their
like
expectations. So
yeah, photo
let
booths
me
are
ask you this:
evolving.
what was your? I agree, it's an evolution, and I mean, obviously, the photo booth is something completely different than it was 50 years ago, and what it
Right.
was 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago. So you have to be
Yeah.
able to move with that evolution. So how was your transition from? Did you just one event say zero props, or was it a transition of less and less props? How did you make that decision, and how did you execute it?
Well, I think you have to, I always believe like if you believe truly in the ideas and the concepts that you're putting out, you need that first. So like you can't just be, okay, I'm going to pull props. We're not going to do props anymore. And in your mind still believe that you need props in a photo booth. If in your mind and your heart you still think that you need you need props to have a great photo booth, it'll be really challenging for you as a company to pull props from your events. And the reason why I say that is because clients hear, um, they hear how you feel about things truly when you're talking to them. So if you don't truly believe that you can do a beautiful photo booth, a well executed photo booth without props, it'll be a hard sell to your clients. For me, I started moving towards that in my mind. Like I started understanding like why I didn't want props and why props weren't a benefit to the photo booth. And once I realized that, it was an easy transition. Like we started pulling we stopped posting props on our social media. That's the biggest part of like what people don't realize. Like if you're not for props and you're posting on your social media, your Instagram, your TikTok, you're posting photos and images and highlighting people using props, clients are going to see that you are about props, because that's what you're promoting. If you don't want clients who love props, who want props for their photo booth, don't highlight those photos. I mean, even if those photos are great, if you have people holding props, your clients and your prospectives are going to see that and they're going to connect with that, and you're going to have those kind of clients approaching you for a photo. So it'll be a hard sell for you to be like, no, we're not for props, because your whole social media message that you're sending out to your prospects and your clients is we're about props. So we stopped posting anything with props. We don't post any setup photos with props. We don't post any like actual event photos where guests are. We usually highlight like, clients and guest photos where they're really just working their, they're just voguing themselves. They're working their own beauty, and it's more of an elevated experience, and that's what our message on social media is. So it was really easy for me. Like I really didn't have it in my rental agreement. It still says props included, but our clients, because they don't see that on any of our social media, they don't really ask or question it for the most part. I think we pulled props maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if I want to guess. And I've only had maybe under 20 conversations with brides about like if we include props and why, where I've had to talk to them about like why we don't do props. And if they, I always tell my clients, like, if you really insist on having props, we have tons. I mean, we've been doing this for 12, 13 years. We have bins and tables of props, but here's why I don't recommend it, and it's really getting them to understand why it's not to their benefit to have props, because they don't need it. And when you reassure them, like we do like, hundreds of events every single year, and people have a great time. We get so much referrals. Most of our business comes from word of mouth referrals. So the fact that we don't have props and people still have a great time, that just reassures our brides and our clients, like, you don't need props, and a lot of it is just the reassurance. Like, people want props because they think that's what their family wants. That's what their friends love. And when you reassure them, like, they're going to have a great time without it anyways. You don't need it. But if you do insist on having it, we can always hide it. If anybody asks, we'll pull it out. And that worked very well in the beginning. Like I would tell, some brides that were kind of on the fence, like, if you really feel like your family and friends need props, we'll hide it. And the first person that asks where are the props at, we'll pull it out for them. And we've had a lot of weddings where nobody has asked. And we've, after the wedding, we talked to the bride, and we're like, I told you didn't need them, like none of or even events where the bride insists on having tons of props, the guests don't even use them. They don't even pick them up. Maybe they use like one prop for the entire wedding, and that gives you the confidence when you're selling to your guests and your clients. If you see this at your own events and you believe this, you see this in real life, it's very easy to convince your clients, because you're not selling them a fake truth. You're telling them the honest truth that you don't need props. It's conviction and true belief in what you're saying. So that was easy for me. Easy transition.
Yeah, if you believe in what you're selling, it makes it a lot easier, and that goes with anything. I'm glad you mentioned social media. We just had that talk with the person that's doing our social media right now, just because I was looking through. I don't spend enough time looking at my social media, and I just noticed within the last week or so, there was a very prop heavy photo. So I had to have that same discussion. Like, we've got props, but we don't want to be seen as that prop company, because right. I feel like, and it may just be my own personal opinion, it may not be accurate, but I feel that represents a lower budget experience, a lower budget photo booth company. I just, I told them to keep that photo there because of the systems you have on feeds for Instagram are a pain. But we post enough that hopefully it'll be drowned out pretty soon, and told them, like, no props in photos that we post. So
yeah,
we just
it's
barely
just
made that transition socially right now. I mean, I thought that it was kind of understood. Sometimes, like, obviously you shouldn't just assume things. And so we just had that actual conversation now that you did like 5 years ago. So that's funny.
Yeah. If I look back, I would have never I remember in the early years, there were some companies that had already made the transition. And I remember them saying, we just don't do props. Like when people would ask, how do you tell clients you don't do props? And these photo booth owners would just be like, we just don't do it. And it blew my mind and I couldn't understand how you couldn't bring props and it was a non-issue for clients. And it wasn't until I truly believed that you don't need props is when I was able to make the transition. So I can't
Hmm.
stress enough, like you really have to believe it. Like people can sit there and tell you no props, no props. And you can sit there and be like, okay, I want to save money. I don't want to do props. But if you still aren't 100% on board, it is going to be one hard transition because people will hear that. People are going to hear that you
Absolutely.
really, yeah. I never would have imagined myself being a company that doesn't do props because that was such a heavy sell for me early in the years. We invested so much in like very unique type of props. And our photos spoke up to those props. We had like the horse's head is just one that really stands out to me, and guests loved it. And going back now, I can't even imagine the type of events that we do, people putting on a horse's head because there's two very distinct types of photo booths now. I feel like there's like the silly, nerdy, like everybody's just being super goofy. There's that photo booth company, and then there's the more elevated, like photography, photo booth, portrait booth company where that's not even the vibe that you want. Like nobody
Right.
walks into our photo booth and it's just trying to be like, being silly. Nobody's doing that. Everybody's, getting their portraits done. So it's a totally different vibe, and your social media speaking to that makes such a difference. It
Yeah.
I, yeah. Um, but
With
it has nothing to do with like me wanting to be cheap with props because we spend a lot of money on props. We have tons. We have giant like married signs and stuff like that. We have like a really cute like car that it looks like people are driving and stuff. So we spend a lot of we invested a lot into props and you know um I
yeah,
think
and
there's a time and place though.
there is, and we, of course, I think everyone has invested a lot on props. We have as well, and the storage. Like I am so envious of what your storage must look like because have got like an entire wall of boxes of props, and they're very nicely organized and stored, and it's still an
Organized.
entire wall. We've just got so many props, and we're very
Yeah.
minimal with props as well. And our transition, like I was feeling it pretty quickly that I didn't care for the props, but I just felt like they had to exist because it was just part of the industry. And also, as at PBX, that someone was talking about not having props, and it just didn't resonate with me. I just couldn't imagine our clients accepting that. And someone asked
Yeah.
them what they do when someone requests props, and they say, "Well, if someone really wants props, we'll buy some, and then we either give them to them at the end of the event and throw them away." And I was just like, "Throw them away? Props are so expensive." But then when you get to a point where you're charging more, you can kind of resonate with one event needing $100 worth of props and throwing them away isn't that big of an event or big of a deal. But if you're doing that for every event, but we certainly don't do that. So the first thing I wanted to get rid of personally were hats because they were so cumbersome. We had a full hat rack and hats all over it. And I couldn't imagine people being okay with not having hats at the booth. So I started with bringing them in and just putting them under the table, like you mentioned, hiding them. And if someone asks, I would just bring them out. But after like 3 months of this and zero people asking about hats, I
Yeah.
stopped bringing them. And then I started doing it with the rest of the props because we had like 50 lips and mustaches on sticks and 100 pairs of sunglasses. And so we just slowly got lower and lower and lower and putting them away and just saying, okay, we'll bring them out if people ask or say, this is all you have. And no one ever did. So I really should just take that last step and put everything away. But now what we bring is 6 signs, 2 mustaches, 2 lips, 2 sunglasses, and a fish, which has its own story. And that's it. And if it's in a very small box, it's like 12 inches by 8 inches, and probably I don't know, 4 or 6 inches, probably 6 inches tall. So it's a very small box. It doesn't take up very much space in our load in and whatnot, and we use a very small, like 4-foot table now. So it doesn't take up as much space, and it's very minimal, and people don't get carried away. But we still try to discourage people from wanting props. But I should do what you mentioned, and just saying, like, having a second spot. If you say you want
Yeah.
props, would it be okay if we hide them but bring them out if somebody asks for them or something like that? Because I need to make that jump. I need to get away from them. And it was a lot easier. Like, I think a lot of people moved away from props after COVID because of the germs. And that was one of the things with the horse head. Like, they're so filthy and people using them all night.
Yeah.
Our grossest thing that we got rid of long before COVID because it was so gross were pipes. Every single person, whether they took a photo with the pipe or not, like a smoking pipe,
Oh.
they would put it in their mouth and set it back down, or else they would take a photo with it in their mouth and they'd set it back down. Even if they weren't using it in the photo, while they're just going through the props, they'd pick it up, put it in their mouth, and look at their spouse, and their spouse would be like, no.
Yeah.
And they put it down. I'm like,
yeah.
you know how many people have had that in their mouth tonight alone? It just, so we got rid of that really quick. It's incredible. Like, after a couple drinks, people don't care about germs at all enough to just put a strange pipe in their mouth that they find on a prop table that is just, even if you have antibacterial wipes and you're cleaning them constantly, there's so many germs on a prop table.
I feel like during COVID was such an easy window for a lot of folks who have been on the fence to transition over to no props. That would have been, I think that even if you've been a company who had, 2 8-foot tables, that would have been the moment where, I mean, you should have been pulling props anyways during that time because of the sanitation and all the issues with COVID, that would have been an easy window. But that really, when COVID happened, any clients that we really had that were still kind of on the fence, that conversation was so short. It was like, we can't even do props because of COVID. The same thing with memory books, like, the pins. I mean, you think about like the pins being used by clients, by guests, but the props is worse. Exactly what you're saying. People putting things into their mouth. Those props have been places that I don't even when you know where those props have been, you don't even want to touch them at the end of the night, So it was very easy to tell clients during COVID, like, yeah, no, we can't even move forward with that. We can't, the fact that, yeah.
And during that time, we would basically charge $250 for props because we told them we would need to have a second host on site to continually clean. That's their entire job, is to be there and cleaning the props as people use them. And that was an easy discouragement because people didn't want to pay that much, and they would understand.
I feel like if you have a whole crazy table of props, that really is a job. Even if you're not talking about sanitizing the props. Like, I remember when I had a 6-foot table of props, it really is its own job because people, they use the props and then they drop it and your table looks like a mess. And when you're doing backyard parties, this is a con for props. Is like, when you set up, you take photos of the setup shot. It looks fine. You look like a retail store, which you shouldn't be. But I mean, at least it's neat. But yeah, but like,
depending
once
on your style of props.
Yeah. And I know people love that, but I don't know. When I see it, I just see like you look like a retail store. Like, you don't look like a photo booth company. But anyways, once you're like live and guests start running through your photo booth and those props get everywhere, it just looks so sloppy. I mean, like, if you're doing $1 million event, do you really want people looking over in the corner of this $1 million event and there's a photo booth with nasty, like gnarly, like wigs and hats that look like they've been through better days, like the hats, the fur, the
boas.
I just, I don't even want to say anything about boas because, like the sweat on boas, even if you have, I know they have the boas that don't shed, but just the sweat that it wraps around people's neck is so. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm just remembering when we had this stuff and just the sanitation. But in terms of like your presence there, like, you really do look like a vendor that doesn't belong in $1 million wedding when
Mm-hmm.
you have those kind of props. Like that's something that I learned as I was growing, like the type of events that we had. That's not like, you do not want to be the vendor that people are like, oh my gosh, that's such an eyesore at our high-end event, you know? So I don't know. I guess it depends on how you're marketing your company. If you're marketing your company to like backyard parties, you know, kids parties, you know, where
They
they're
probably
just
want
really trying to
props.
be goofy, then they probably gonna want props. Even if you believe you don't need props, if you're doing like backyard parties, it'll be a hard sell because you really will see guests that will be asking and demanding for those props. If you're selling your photo booth as more of an elevated experience, most of those guests aren't going to be asking for props because they're not looking for that goofy silliness, you know. So I guess the conversation should be more like, what kind of photo booth company are you, you know, like what are you shooting to be? Are you shooting to be the silly, goofy, cheesy photo booth from like the years before? That's the impression that a lot of people had of photos. But like the evolution now is more elevated. Like you see, you know, you brought up enclosed photo booths coming back, and that's there's a huge reason for why that's happening, but it is a lot more of like an elevated photo op, not people being silly. Like you see those vintage photos that are coming out from those enclosed booths, they're like glamorous
Mm-hmm.
glamorous vintage style photos. Like nobody is getting in those photos being like goofy, you know. So it's just a matter of like, what side of the photo booth are you trying to be with your company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree with all of that. I'm trying to decide if we're going to try and take the leap to eliminate our small amount of props left. I don't know if I'm ready yet. I don't know.
You don't
I'll have
have
to
to
give it
be
some
ready.
thought.
Just do what I did, because when I first started minimizing, we used to have like a 6 foot table, and then eventually we shut it down to like 6 props, and then eventually it was the whole concept of like, okay, we're gonna have props, but they're gonna be hidden. We're gonna be hidden to the side, and the first person that asks for props, we're gonna whip them out, and that worked really well for me. And it just, again, you need that re affirmation. You need that affirmation from your own life experience at events,
Yeah.
like your own live experience. So once I started seeing myself with my own eyes, like really people have a great time without the photo booth, it really made it easy for me. You know, I don't even really discuss props with my clients unless they ask me. So clients will ask me because none of our online presence says that we have props. So people will ask, but it's so few and far between. And the ones
Mm-hmm.
that do ask, like if I said 10 that asked, I'd only have one that would absolutely insist on having props. And the funny thing is, we bring props to their event, and in the gallery of like 450 photos, you'll see like 4 photos total where the props are being used. You know, so that again just reaffirms like where I stand on props. Like you
Right.
really don't need them. Yeah.
You know what I miss about a lot of props is the 8-foot table. I don't miss bringing it or setting it up, but it was such a great place to hide and store
For storage.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah, and I miss
I
that.
was thinking the same thing, because now it's like sometimes you show up at an event and you're like, oh my gosh, they literally have there's no
Yeah,
storage
the worst
anywhere.
is
You gotta,
carrying everything
yeah,
back out to your car.
back to your car. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's funny. I was thinking the same exact thing. But
So I guess we should hit on types of props really quickly for those of people that are using props. I mean, I think people typically know what kind of props are out there, so I don't think we're providing any new information. But you've got your physical props, like your signs, the traditional like PVC signs, which were a huge breakthrough in the industry when those became a thing and we could get away from. And there was a time when everyone used crappy paper signs with sticks, and before those PVC signs came out, the plastic signs.
I
And
still
they're
love
great.
those though.
Yeah.
And then there's
very easy to
wearables like the
theme to
hats.
different events, and very easy to
Yeah.
clean, very easy to use for branding if you have a corporate client, like they are like the quintessential like best prop that exists. I think is just a simple sign, PVC sign. Mustaches and lips, classics. But again, like hopefully you're not using paper stuff. Spend a little money. Get the resin. Hard
PVC.
plastic
Yeah.
mustaches and lips. And again, very easy to sanitize and clean. I don't suggest using any kind of fabric. No hats, no boas, no wigs, anything that's difficult to just wipe off quickly and sanitize. Get rid of that.
The money boa was pretty amazing. That was probably one of my
The what?
That was probably one of my the money boa is like this big giant boa that wraps around you. I love the money boa and the money fan. Those anything to do with money was always a really popular prop for us.
Yeah, in fact, in the sense of popularity, our like money fan was our most stolen prop.
Oh my god, yeah, because people thought it was real.
I don't think people thought it was real. I think they just liked it, you know, wanted to go home and do their own photos and stuff. So
No,
we
yeah,
stopped
we had
getting that just because it was still stolen so often.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite props too. And then we used to have like the money, the actual like money, loose money that people could throw
Mhm.
because we used to like to do boomerangs a lot and throwing money in the air. People love that.
Yeah, or 360s. That's popular with 360s and money guns. And we'll do that. We've
yeah.
got money guns and money, but again, we'll charge for an extra staff member because they have to, like, their entire job is picking money up off the floor. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hate it. Glasses, we
I-
also super easy to clean off. So, I mean, glasses are glasses. Everyone knows what sunglasses are. Then you've got the digital props. With primarily, I think generally with iPad based booths. I guess there are some with other booths like the mirror booths and stuff have digital props, and I guess in Darkroom you could do digital props as well. But if you
Yeah.
want the ones that actually like attach to people, typically I think you have to use like an iPad based booth for that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and then like
What
stickers,
are
which
your
are
thoughts on the digital? What are your thoughts on the digital props though? Like
I hate
do
them
you
just
use
because
them or
you can't like it's a good idea in theory. Like we just had this conversation with a client the other day that wanted digital props and they wanted things like word bubbles that have different sports things like Go Team and things like that. And if you're taking a photo of one person, that's fine. But as soon as there's 3 or 4 people in there and they all have the exact same word bubble over their heads, you know, it just takes away from the photo. So really it depends on if it's
Yeah.
a single op or a group. You know, if people are doing groups,
You know,
then
there's-
they just don't
you know
work.
there's some apps that have like digital prop packs. So if it's like 2 or 3 people in the photo, each person has like a different prop.
No, I wasn't familiar with that. I don't know how
Yeah.
that's
They
neat.
have like digital prop packs. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what software it is. I think Breeze is one of them. Breeze iPad is one of them, and maybe I don't want to say maybe Snappic, but I know
No,
for sure. I
Snappic
think
definitely
Breeze
you can't
iPad.
do that with
Snappic
Snappic.
doesn't. Okay, Breeze iPad has like prop packs for each person.
So then there's stickers also, digital stickers, which I do like quite
Yeah.
a bit because then you do have the option as opposed to digital props. You can just add one word bubble
Slide
and place
it
it wherever you
around.
want and resize it and
Yeah.
turn it and do whatever you want with it instead of like a digital prop is kind of just wherever it is, you know, if it is stuck to
Yeah.
someone's features. So if they move in or move out, it just stays in the exact same spot above their head or wherever it's positioned. Where
Yeah,
a sticker you
on
can
the
place
face.
wherever. The trouble
It's
is,
interactive too.
yeah, it's interactive. For whatever reason, Snappic doesn't do that yet, and I know that they can because they do it in their virtual booths, but they don't do it
Do they?
in the regular booths, and it drives me crazy. So whenever we need stickers, which is the direction we pushed this client that I was talking about with the Go Team word bubbles and stuff, we pushed them to stickers because it makes a lot more sense. And we use Darkroom for that because you can just put it wherever and resize it. And that mirror booths are pretty popular for that sort of thing as well.
Yeah.
As far as digital though, I feel like that's kind of it. Props and stickers.
Where do you stand on like props for 360s?
It's
know you
really
brought that up
weird
a
when
little
people
bit
want us
earlier.
to bring props for 360s. I don't know why it's so much weirder to me than a photo booth because, you know, it's just so strange for people to be like holding signs or something as the camera's moving around. Like it really distracts from, you know, people are trying to it's a video, so people are trying to move and dance and things, and you're trying to read this sign that not only is the camera moving, but the people are moving. So it just doesn't make sense. But of course, things like confetti and money guns and stuff like that look great. Again, it's just a matter
Yeah.
of labor and cleanup, and if people are willing to pay for that, depending on what kind of event it is. So
Yeah, I think like three themed props for 360 are kind of cool. Like if you're doing like an 80s party and you have like a guitar, like I think that is pretty cool. Like I like the actual like 3D props, like the inflatables. I've seen really cool like inflatable balls that you can throw around. What are they, like beach balls that you throw around?
yeah,
Like I think those are really
so
cool
something
for
that you could
360.
like
I don't
engage with and not just hold,
Yes, not like a
essentially.
sign. Yeah, yeah. Like I love like the idea of like a instrument, or, for 80s, or even like I don't like wigs, but still I feel like 80s wig that's over the top is really, and
Hmm.
that's the money boa. Like I thought I love that. And then some of those
Yeah,
wings that people like, yeah, the ribbons. I don't use that for my 360.
just things
I'm
that
just saying like
encourage motion are good, because again,
yeah,
on
like any
360 people are
yeah.
very awkward and they don't know what to do. Like we had a guy
They don't know what to
juggle
do with
once, and that was really really great. But yeah, and
yeah.
if someone has a boa, or a scarf, I'm definitely encouraging them to throw it over their shoulder
Yes.
or flip their hair or something like that. So
Or
anything
like
that,
those cheerleader flags. Those
yeah,
cheerleader flags. My gosh, we had an event where someone one of the guests happened to have it. They were so nice. They they let us use it for some of our sessions. And they were like waving this flag around. It just looks so amazing and very dramatic in the 360, like adding to it. But not being like over the top, like some of the graphics I've seen for 360 is over the top.
hmm
Small interactive props like that I love for 360.
So I think
Yeah.
that about wraps up props, though. Let us know if you're using props, what you think. If I'm sure there's something we overlooked or missed, so let us know. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you next week.
To keep the conversation going, join our Facebook group, Pro Booth Talk Community. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider showing your support by subscribing, liking, reviewing, or sharing this topic with someone in the industry.